So first, a disclaimer. What I'm about to say is just my own personal views, not the views of my clients, not the views of Cooley. I say that so I don't get in trouble later. So our title was How to Use AI Without Getting Sued. And here's the short secret answer. You can't. We don't know, right? What we're entering into right now is a period of uncertainty. There's fear, uncertainty, and doubt all over the place, right? We have uncertainty about the capabilities. What we do know for certain is that the hype over generative AI is far in excess of the capability of generative AI today. That doesn't mean that it's going to be that way 6 months from now, 9 months from now, 18 months from now. But today, where we sit today, the hype around it far exceeds the capability. We also have uncertainty around the legal framework governing AI. We don't know what the regulations are going to be. What we do know is that there will be regulations. And based on the White House executive order and the AI Act in Europe, we know there will be a lot of regulations. Right? That White House order was about 10 times longer than most White House executive orders. And it asked for a larger number of regulations to be promulgated between the next 90 and 265 days. Right? So we know regulation is coming. What we don't know is exactly, we know some areas of regulation, but how it's going to be regulated, we have no idea. We have lawsuits around the LLMs. They started getting filed January, February. They're going to continue to be filed. There was one filed this week. Even if they get decided initially in the next 12 months, they won't be finally decided for probably 3 to 4 more years, right? These will be appealed, will be going to the Supreme Court. So we don't know what content and what data we can use to build an LLM. We don't know if those LLMs will need to be transparent or not. We don't know how to test those LLMs or those AI applications for bias. We don't know a lot, right? So where we end up with all of that is in a situation where we can take some steps to mitigate our risks, but ultimately, how do we avoid getting sued? Don't use generative AI, right? Which is not realistic, right? We're going to all use it. So you have to build that into how you think about it. So one of the ways that a lot of our clients are trying to mitigate the risk of the use of generative AI is when they're building their own LLMs. And what I'll use is some nomenclature here, what we call ethically sourced LLMs. It's a little bit of a misnomer, but think of it as the LLMs are just trained on contributed data. So data where it's been licensed. There's been no scraping, there's been no taking of other data. It's just licensed data. And people are positing, well, if I do that, I won't get sued for copyright infringement or I won't get sued for that LLM. That's right. But that doesn't eliminate the issue of bias, doesn't necessarily issue or mitigate the issue of transparency. It doesn't mitigate all the other issues where you could get sued on, but it does at least take away some of the basic core elements. Then there's the broad-based training, right? Which is take whatever data I can have, grab it all, put it together and train my LLM and hope for the best, right? And in some sense, that's where OpenAI and a lot of the existing LLMs were, because they started out as science projects. They didn't really start out as commercial products that expected to be regulated, so they didn't build it. So if someone today were to go to a lot of these sort of what I'll call older, more mature LLMs and said, you need to be transparent. Tell me every piece of data you trained with. They couldn't, right? They could not do that today. And so when we think about the regulations that are coming, and we know are coming around transparency, around bias, figuring out how you're training your LLMs or how you're fine-tuning it or how you're building your application is going to become critical. And it's not just an LLM problem. It goes to usage, right? We do have current regulations and current laws that deal with things like if you're using AI to do financial related decision making, there's existing laws that say you cannot do that in a biased way, right? So how do you prove that your LLM is not biased? Well, there are companies out there that are doing scientific bias studies on the outputs of LLMs, right? That's one way to do it. It's expensive. And if you think about it, the LLM changes every time you use it. So does that mean you have to retest it? How often do you have to retest it? Data. It's going to be, has been, and will be an area of litigation, right? Most of these lawsuits, while they're framed as copyright cases, and they actually are copyright cases, they're really about data. They're around use of data, right? And that is true whether it is generative AI or if it's any other form of AI, right? Machine learning. It's all about the data. And if you go back 20 years ago, you could grab data and get data legally all sorts of ways pretty easily. In today's world, people have recognized the value of data. So in companies' contracts with their customers, if you say, I want to use your data for anything other than providing the services to that customer, you get pushback because they realize that there is value in that data. And if you start to use that data and they think they have a right to claim for that data, that's when you can get sued. And that leads to privacy and security, being transparent about data collection, and it really deals with a lot of those other things. So it's really about being one of the ways you can mitigate is be transparent about how you train and how you use the data, and be accountable for how you do that. Ultimately, what most of our clients have said is, given the state of the technology today, what you really need is human oversight. And in the legal industry, as a good example, where we are is, if we do research, and you can see these cases that have come up where lawyers have gotten fired or disciplined by the courts because they just relied on the generative AI, and the generative AI made stuff up. And then they gave it to the judge and said, here's a great case. And the judge said, that case doesn't exist. That's a fake case, right? So you do run into that. You need human oversight. You still need to check it. Will we always need that? Probably not, but that's where we are today. So in the end, at this point, no one knows what's going to happen. And anyone who stands up and tells you, I can tell you what your legal risks are around the use of AI, they're guessing. Right? They may be educated guesses, right? We have some insight, we kind of know, but we don't know for sure. And you know what? We're not going to know for sure 6 months from now, and we're not going to know for sure 12 months from now. It will be years that we're going to be in this period of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And that's just something we're all going to have to get comfortable with. We're going to have to navigate through together. All right? And I finished on time, unlike Wagner, so he can have some of my time back.
Yes, with 15 seconds to spare. Well done, Adam.